What are some of the biggest gaming controversies you can think of? The hot coffee mod for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the Gamergate culture wars of 2014. As the format entered the mainstream, these difficult moments moved out of the tabloid pages and into the growing online communities. Whether it's through official websites, forums, or social media channels, developers and publishers engage with the player base more than ever. Anyone scrolling through a comment section knows that inevitably means a metric ton of toxicity. One modern release would lay the groundwork for this firestorm of online rage, and that was Bioware's Mass Effect 3, the closing chapter of a trilogy tasked with living up to tremendous expectations. I'll go on record and say that I love the Mass Effect trilogy. It's my favourite series in all of gaming. I've played all the way through at least 6 times along with every DLC pack, exhausting every possible choice and class option. The first 2 Mass Effect titles achieved immense popularity and took the RPG genre into the modern blockbuster status we see today. Then we came to Mass Effect 3. For the most part, the game was very well received on release. The overwhelming feeling of a galaxy in total war resulted in many powerful moments on the way through the campaign. Not only that, its multiplayer components proved surprisingly enjoyable. What we didn't know at the time was that Mass Effect 3 would lay the blueprint for many greedy and exploitative practices to come, not to mention foreshadowing the backlash of fanbases against their favourite studios. Leading up to 2012, we had seen the occasional burst of outrage from the masses. On-disc downloadable content, disappointing releases like Duke Nukem Forever, and the shoddy early access games that were starting to enter the market. Mass Effect 3 marked a major turning point. Before the game even came out on March 6th, there was trouble afoot, with the From Ashes DLC taken out of the standard version and pushing players to go deluxe instead. Considering how important Javik was to the story's context, many viewed the move as indefensible. The late critic Total Biscuit announced he would be boycotting the title as a result. Even more telling was the development timescale. Having already been working on Dragon Age 2 and Star Wars The Old Republic, Bioware put Mass Effect 3 together in 1 year instead of 2, with EA demanding a March 2012 release to meet financial quotas. That kind of ruthlessness from publishers is all too familiar in today's landscape. Countless unfinished titles have been put out to the masses with the intention of selling rather than offering a quality release. In the case of ME3, this was a mere prelude to the frustrations vented over the final product, which arrived with no major competitors in sight. All the eyes of the gaming community were on this one big release, and it turned out to be very controversial. We'll start with the game's multiplayer components, a first for the series and also the first time you could play as different aliens. In turn, these brought dynamic new playstyles from the damage-resistant Krogan to the support-focused Volus. This main hook was very enticing at first, and the connections with the Galaxy at War system tied single and multiplayer modes together. When you got past this novelty, however, the mode's true purpose reared its ugly head. There are tons of unlockables, but the game demanded a lot out of you to get them. It took me a full 8 years comprising hundreds of hours just to earn every unique character. My final purchase, with in-game credits, not real money as the game tempts you to do, granted the Turian Engineer class, but the mileage of every player varied greatly. It all came down to those dreaded loot boxes, which are now most prevalent in EA's Ultimate Team mode in FIFA. Back in 2012, there was some blowback over the inclusion of these godforsaken crates, but much of this was overshadowed by a bigger point of contention. We'll get to that later. Let's break it down. When you unlock a character, you only get a basic set of customization options that slowly expands by receiving duplicates in the crates. From secondary colours through to lights, that's 5 to 6 repetitions of the same character card. After this, the character is removed from the packs and you won't get them again. Already, this requires more effort than necessary because of a simple design choice. The same also held true for weapons. In a very sneaky move, Bioware pushed the weapon upgrades up to 10 ranks in multiplayer, rather than the 5 seen in the campaign mode. This means weapons took even longer to unlock than characters, as you had to reach the max level for a single gun to remove it from the item drops. Being ranked between common and ultra rare, you can already see how this factors into the cycle of purchasing packs. To get a better chance for a rare drop, you have to remove all the common and uncommon items first, which is incredibly time consuming in itself. Whether you're grinding away for weapons or characters, this gameplay loop was designed to generate impatience. It's the same 10 waves of Horde mode that take longer if you're playing alone, and outstay their welcome the more you ratchet up the difficulty. A bronze match with 4 players typically takes 25 minutes or less. Bump it up to gold and we're talking at least 35 minutes, with the enemies receiving multiple health and damage buffs the higher you go. When we convert that to prices in the store, that's 2 successful matches on gold, 2 to 3 on silver, and 4 or 5 on bronze. In other words, lowering the difficulty increases the amount of grinding, while raising it increases the chances of a mission failure, and only receiving a portion of the in-game currency. Adding free co-op partners helps out with this a great deal, but this is also unpredictable as you can never tell if they'll revive you or just run off on their own to rack up more points. On top of that, if you lose connection or are booted out of the online match, you'll always forfeit any experience and credits you earned. These design decisions in pursuit of greater profits worked like clockwork, as EA nearly doubled their digital revenue from $211 million in 2011 to $419 million in 2012. As we've seen in countless releases over the last decade, when an online mode does everything it can to get you to spend real money, it really starts to detract from the strengths of its gameplay. Mass Effect 3 was the precursor for what we see in modern gaming, as companies have tried all kinds of unethical tactics with loot boxes. We've had boosters to speed up gameplay in Ubisoft titles, in-game advantages in titles like Middle-earth: Shadow of War, though arguably the worst of the bunch was Star Wars Battlefront 2. In this title, the grind for star cards was so bad, EA was forced into a climb down from the masses. There's now talk of a play-to-earn system involving NFTs, which will make the grind even worse and push the fun factor away in favour of pure, unadulterated frustration. Add to that the hideous proposition of NFT loot boxes, and you've got a dire situation for the industry going forward. Then of course, there's the big one, Mass Effect 3's ending. Rushed, lacking in detail and closure, prompting outrage from the player base, at least in the original version. It triggered arguably the biggest backlash in gaming history at the time. Online campaigns, angry comments, a collection of cupcakes that all taste the same sent to the dev team's office. No other community firestorm had been this fierce. With not one but 2 excellent games to follow up, and a grand story to conclude, the vocal side of the fanbase was amplified significantly. At the time I wasn't angry, just disappointed. Looking back on the anger though, it was the way everything was presented. The abruptness of the climax, the lack of definitive endings for each of the characters, and the major differences being reduced to colour swaps. This was improved with the extended cut DLC, but even this wasn't enough to fully salvage Bioware's reputation. It's clear that the grand finale was rushed out the door by EA, a lesson they still haven't learned over a decade later. In hindsight, the original endings, with the added detail from free DLC, do have some merit. None of them bring a happy conclusion. This fits in well with the game's themes of loss and sacrifice, while also showing a galaxy that acted too late to save everyone, whether you chose Destroy, Synthesis or Control. In 2012, however, gamers were not pacified by Bioware's efforts to contain the damage. If anything, the vitriol spewed online appears to have gotten worse over time, with other controversies in the AAA scene. Whether it's releasing broken products or making disagreeable creative decisions, countless developers have become easy prey over the last 10 years. Some of the backlash has been reasonable, like the recent revolt against NFTs in Stalker 2, but others cross beyond the lines of bad taste and into full-on mania. Harassment, death threats, and general entitlement are rife across online platforms. The biggest parallel I've seen in recent years was The Last of Us Part 2. Being another story-heavy game, a torrent of rage sprang up around the game's writing and the treatment of its characters. Communities have only grown more vocal over their favourite IPs in recent years. The anonymous nature of the internet means this shows no signs of easing up. Looking back, the biggest downfall was Bioware itself. After sitting on top of the world between 2009 and 2010, Mass Effect 3 put them into a downward spiral that they've never really recovered from. Many of its most experienced staff members left the company, and despite the success of DLC packs like Citadel, the developer just hasn't been the same. They seem to be putting themselves on the right track with Dragon Age Inquisition in 2014, but the massive failures of Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem dragged them through the mud for the rest of the decade. Frankly, I'm surprised they're still standing after both debacles, but it seems EA knows the value of an RPG maker when they see one. The finale of the original Mass Effect trilogy was so contentious that it followed them everywhere they went. With a new Mass Effect now on the horizon, the embattled developer is now looking to work their way out of their mistakes and find some kind of redemption for years of lackluster projects. Will they be able to pull it off? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. Looking back on Mass Effect 3's controversies a decade later reveals a lot of issues seen today in gaming. Maybe someday I'll give the series a full retrospective treatment. For now, links to my blog and channel are in the description.